What's up, everyone, and welcome to the 13th episode of the Control Freak Podcast, which is now proudly sponsored by Team Solitary Pro. I am your host, Alex Blackard, or @LessAlex on Twitter. I am joined today by Evan Bruce. Evan, how are you doing tonight?
Good, man. How you doing?
I'm pretty good. Pretty excited about today's episode. Now, usually on our podcast, we talk about blue-white control, any kind of control that's really relevant in the modern format. Today, we have a lot of changes that just happened in MPL. We have a Rivals League. We finally know what an MPL is. Of course, there was a GP, a modern GP that just ended. We had an SCG Team Open, so take that with a grain of salt. And then we had, of course, a modern classic too. So a lot of things to get into today. Before we get into it, though, if you enjoy this content, make sure to follow. It's on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all the other podcast apps. So make sure to check them out all over the interwebs. And yeah, but getting into the nitty-gritty of these details that were kind of dropped on us earlier in the week, we finally know what an NPL is. Evan, do you kind of want to explain at least what kind of cuts they've made and the new Rivals League, exactly what it is?
So, what Wizards has done is finally given us a clear answer of what the Magic Pro League is, what it entails to be a part of it, how you become a part of it. And there's a lot of information, but once you sit and look at it, it makes sense.
It does make sense. There's flow charts. It's all fine. They basically dumped an entire... it was an encyclopedia's worth of information on us earlier this week. But basically, getting down to the nitty-gritty, they are cutting the MPL from 32 players to only 24, and they're introducing what is known as the Rivals League. And what the Rivals League is basically like the modern league, the
minor league.
What the Rivals League is the minor league version of the MPL, which is going to have 46 players, 12 of which are the top 12 ranked non-MPL players on digital platforms, the first 12 tabletop non-MPL players, 6 discretionary players, the bottom 4 players from the previous MPL season, and the bottom 12 MPL gauntlet, which is a whole nother thing we need to explain. Overall, what are your thoughts on this?
I like that they're giving us a clear indicator of where, what your goal is in being a competitive player. As for the Rivals League, I think it is a really nice way to keep the MPL from becoming stale. As much as we all have our favorite pros and we like seeing these players do well, I think in the past Magic has suffered a bit at times from seeing the same
faces.
You have the same competitive group of, say, 25 that you kind of rotate through.
Yeah, that's something to look at it from a viewer standpoint, too, trying to make this into an actual esport.
Well, and that's the thing, is like, this wasn't an update to the Magic Pro League, or this wasn't an update to tournament play. This was an update to what they're calling the Magic ESPORTS.
Yes.
And I think this is a very clear move that they're really trying to push into the esport market.
Yeah, and one thing, too, from the player side of it, the competitive scene, for the last, year or so, since basically the MPL was created, we didn't know how to make it to the MPL. You couldn't...
Oh, not at all.
You used to be able to walk into your friend in the local game store and know from point A to point Z how to get to the MPL. The first day you start playing Magic, you had a distinct pathway, and this is a way to get there. So I'm very excited about it overall. It's great because they're separating it too. They're bringing back, they're starting Players Tour, the Players Tour, which is basically, so it's a Pro Tour basically. It's a non-MPL Pro Tour. It's tabletop Pro Tours basically.
Pretty much.
So the way that you get to the Players Tours are PTQs, Player Tour qualifiers, so not Pro Tour qualifiers. So they did a clever thing there. WPN qualifiers, Premier Series, so these are SCGs.
This is what I'm most excited
about. Yeah, so
about.
SCG Invitational winners get invited to PTs, which is phenomenal.
It's not even just that, but just playing in these SCG events or these Channel Fireball events is going to give you points towards qualifying for the Rivals League.
Yeah, and I saw also on Twitter that they were maybe not all the information is out yet, and Face to Face Games has a circuit in Canada, and the Nerd Rage circuit as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wonder if Nerd Rage would get up there.
Yeah, if you're in the Midwest, or if you're a fan of the podcast, you know that we're based out of St. Louis. The Nerd Rage is in the Midwest, often in Iowa, Illinois, stuff like that. So that really excites me. You never know.
Yeah.
So, also, Grand Prix / Magic Fests also filter into the PTs. And then Magic the Gathering Online will still have Pro Tour or Players Tour qualifiers on there. And then from there, you make it to the PT. They're breaking them up into Americas, Europe, and Asia Pacific. So it's regional now.
Yep.
What do you think about that? So they're taking a hard kind of Hearthstone, because I believe that is what Hearthstone does regionally.
I think this is great. I think this is Magic finally addressing the communities that love Magic that have just continuously not gotten support, especially places like Latin and South America, a lot of the Asian territories outside of Japan and China.
And the thing of note here is it says Americas, not just America, right? So,
well, and they specifically went out of their way to talk about in their press conference how they're going to be going to places that they've never been before.
Yeah.
That just have these thriving communities that never get a chance to compete at that level.
Yeah, it's awesome all around. And then the Pro Tour Finals, and then the winners of that go to World Championship is finally back. So that is awesome. I'm really excited for that.
With a new kind of qualifier, too. Well, not a new kind of qualifier, but
a new way to qualify, yeah.
Yeah.
And then on the arena side of things, the top 1,200 ranked players in Limited and Constructed get then qualify for Mythic qualifiers, Mythic point challenges, and Mythic qualifiers. And then the winners of those go to the Mythic Invitational, and then the winners of those go into the World Championships. Yep. So I will link the magic.gg article in the notes below if you really want to dig deep, because this thing is...
Give yourself a couple of hours.
I don't know if it's that long.
Maybe days.
It is quite extensive. It is all around, I think it's an amazing thing for Magic. We finally have a path to being a pro, right? And the Rivals thing is I think pretty good design. It's a bit wordy, but once you really break it down and
it feels like to me this will be one of those things that everyone will have a hard time understanding until it's
Yeah,
implemented, and after we've done it
sure.
for a season, it'll click.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. And again, the rivals are top 12 mythic point earners, 6 discretionary slots, which I'm sure they'll give to very prominent streamers.
I would
Um,
assume.
Top 12 player point earners, the bottom 12 from the MPL Gauntlet, and the bottom 4 from the current MPL. So that is one thing, too, that I like, is they're going to, like you said earlier, the kind of new faces will be added to the MPL each season.
I
So
would assume that's part of the rationale for the 6 discretionary invites. I think that's kind of a way Wizards can keep a finger on that button of fresh face rotation.
yeah, and so we also got the image for the Mythic Championship qualifiers, and oh boy, this is the Control Freak podcast. I'm a big fan of it. It is Cryptic Command with the correct art of.
Oh, that's your choice in
Oh,
art.
absolutely! It's the one of the lady sticking her hand out with the. Oh my
It's
gosh!
the
It's so
it's the
beautiful.
master's art.
What's that?
It's the master's art.
Yes, yes, yes. It is the master's art with the flowy draping. It's beautiful. It's all blue. This is a beautiful, beautiful card. Um, I'm really excited for the promo, but this information, this announcement, just completely revitalized not only mine, but it should re-hype up any competitive player, I think.
One thing I do want to give a quick shout out to is um, they opened up the ability for stores to hold qualifying tournaments.
Yes,
So like much smaller stores and much more remote locations can now hold qualifying tournaments,
yes.
which is like something that people have been complaining about since I got into Magic, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's basically like a miniature PTQ.
Yep.
So, and there'll be each WPN event will be provided with 32 promo cards, uh, which is pretty awesome. And then, of
Yeah.
course, your store will have to decide pricing, pricing outside of the promos.
Well,
That's going
sure.
to be all up to. So if you have a smaller store, maybe it's just like a $20 entry fee. But either way it goes,
I mean, just the fact that uh, these qualifiers are going to be so much more accessible
yeah,
is just something I appreciate from Wizards.
yes, and the fact that they exist at all is just amazing, amazing stuff. Of course, the Grand Prix are still going to give you invites. The top eights are still going to give you invites to the Pro Tours, or excuse me, the Players Tour. So that is awesome. Mama, we made it. We finally know what an MPL is. It took you long enough, Wizards of the Coast. Halfway through the year, more than halfway through the year, we finally know what it is. So I'm very excited. Um, but yeah, we did have some tournaments though. We did have. Is
Yep.
there anything else that you'd like to say about?
There's just, there's a lot to unpack with it. I suggest people who are interested in competitive play to really take an hour or so and read through the entire article and look at, they did a really good job of laying out a lot of flow charts that help explain a lot of it. Definitely worth a read.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's very in depth on the website, and yeah. But we did have tournaments, and we need to talk about some blue white because we did have Grand Prix Birmingham this weekend. And yeah, Rory Keir Smith with Mardu Shadow. This deck is a spicy one. This deck's kind of been around, right, for a little bit. Um, but basically, the big additions, like why you're playing Mardu over any other colors, is Teamer Battle Rage is the red card. And of course, you're playing Ranger Captain of Eos. These are gone are the days of Grixis Death Shadow, right?
Yeah, it's pretty dead right now.
It's pretty dead right now. And of course, we've got a couple Fulminator mages in the sideboard. We've got a couple Kolaghan's commands, a Wear Tear, some shenanigans. But yeah, this deck is very, very hot. We did have 2 copies of Hogak. It's still here. It's
What tournament would it be without it?
yeah. I've the last several episodes of the podcast we've talked pretty extensively about Hogak. We know it's an issue. We know it's a problem matchup for us. I suggest if you want to improve the Hogak matchup, play things like Wall of Omens and Restoration Angel. They're great.
I was curious.
What you got?
I was listening to another podcast. They were talking about playing against Hogak.
Sure.
Now this was for Is It Phoenix, but they were talking about how good Thing in the Ice is against Hogak.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you think that's something that the blue-white decks could, like, maybe shift into a slightly more proactive shell against them.
Yeah.
And, like, just switch, like, cut the Snapcasters and move to a Thing in the Ice plan? Or, like, is there not enough spell density to support that?
I think there's probably enough spells, but the problem with that is I think you're looking at a different deck completely. Maybe you'd want to play blue-white mid-range. Right. I don't hate it, but personally, I was just
curious if that was something that was like viable. Or
all of our spells are pretty reactionary. So like if we have just a bunch of counter spells, and you kind of run into this problem even with Monastery Mentor out of the board, is you'll just have like a couple of counter spells and nothing really to point them at. So it's just one of those things where how do you get these in Thing in the Ice's case? How do you get these counters off? If you clear the board up and you're sitting here with Path to Exiles and Ousts and all this stuff, or just counter spells, it's really hard. Obviously, Planeswalkers don't actually affect it. So yeah,
yeah.
That's fair. Yeah, I would suggest not running it. Maybe in the sideboard if you're feeling a little saucy, but
I was just curious.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely a good question. Hardened Scales by Stan Splinter. This deck's been around the block a couple times. It's, in terms of blue-white, we have a pretty good matchup. We have a lot of 1 CMC instant speed removal. So their best draws can definitely beat us, though. That is for sure. You definitely want to keep hands with Path to Exile, things like that. Burn top 8 of the GP. I mean, it happens. It definitely happens. Then we got another Hogak, and then we got blue-white control. You want to tell us about this is a pretty typical blue-white here. They're on the 4 Snapcaster 1 click plan. That's pretty typical. Yeah. We got 2 surgicals. I mean, this is very close to. If you look at Doom Switch's list, this is very typical. Main deck, sideboard, there's some spicy meatballs, though. You wanna
I mean, I have to let you talk about the one card. Like, this is you're the blue-white. You're who everyone's here to listen to. So
yeah, so
let's hear about the spice.
So the sideboard is 3 Celestial Purge, 1 Dovin's Veto, 1 Force Negation, 1 Lyra, 2 Monasteries, 3 Rips, 1 Verdict, 1 Timely, 1 Click, and 1 Elspeth, Champion of the Sun. Elspeth's Champion. So this card is a card that several years ago we were playing. This card is
standard.
No. This card was a modern playable. Yeah, it was out of the board, but Jund is a very good deck now. This card is excellent against fighting Jund.
Yeah, it is.
So you get to a point in the game where if you top deck this, guess what? You don't lose the game because you spit out 3 dudes. It's great. Of course, if you get to ult, obviously the game's over. But even the -3 here is typically killing some problem things like a Goyf. So, especially late in the game, of course, you're playing this late in the game against Jund. What do you think about this spicy?
Uh, I think I don't know. It's hard for me. I love that card,
I mean,
but
it
like
top eight
as
in the
I
GP.
see Modern evolving and like things like Twiddlestorm popping up,
Yeah,
like I see this Elspeth Sun champion in my sideboard, and I
you hate it,
question it a
right?
little bit.
Question your life decisions. Yeah, no, I mean, I like the spice. I definitely love, like, I just like you. I love this card. Um, there is a foil one in my trade, well, not trade binder, but my binder. It'll probably be there forever. But I love the fact that this card is there. It seems good also against Shadow. It seems
Yeah, I
it's
mean it like this is the trump card to any mid-range deck. Like
yeah,
any deck that isn't comboing you
yeah. If
or going under you is gonna fold to Elspeth Sun's champion. Like the card's insane.
absolutely, and I think you could probably bring this in against humans as well. Just make sure you're keeping solid hands, you know, because you don't want to be stuck with like do nothing hand and this giant dumb 6 drop in your hand and then they kill you real quick.
Yeah, this deck plays so many one-ofs.
Oh yeah, so that's the thing though, right? Is because we're playing
Eight, nine,
Narset.
10 one-ofs.
Narset Power Veils lets you play infinite one-offs because you get to find them real easy. And that's something that me and Neo
Yeah.
on a past episode were talking about. Um,
I like how some of the tech that you talked about in earlier episodes is becoming
it's becoming real.
like Timely's main.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's just good. Like
It's
these are,
like blue white lists or something.
well, yeah. I mean, the trends. You just gotta look at the trends of the metagame. It's like
Sure.
I don't know. So I want to talk about the classic before we talk about the open because again, this was a team open. It was modern, standard, legacy. The results are very biased. Would you not agree with that?
Oh no, I would agree 100%.
Yeah. So we had in first place um, Kevin Hong on Hogak, Jund by Tyler O'Brien, Mono Greentron, Brendan Fulton, Mono Red Phoenix, Jared Calabrese. I'm gonna butcher some of these names. um, Bryce Morgan on Jund in fifth, Eldrazi by Corey Lynch, Eldrazi by Carlton Silvestro, and Hogak by Alex Batticelli. Um, there's a spicy deck there in 10th place. And I know this is one that you enjoy. You want to mention it?
I mean, it's Cheerios. This deck is. If you haven't ever seen Cheerios go off,
Yeah, it's
it's
it's the
weird.
pure
It's
steel paladin
fun.
deck. Yeah,
Yeah, it's pure steel SRAM and a bunch of zero artifacts that do absolutely nothing. You try to draw a million cards and you try to grape shot them.
yeah.
Oh, this deck's just good fun.
It is. It is. I love. I have a fascination with Pure Steel Paladin. I played the heck out of that card in Standard.
Yeah,
I built a
used to be
really.
your only
Oh
Moto deck.
man. Oh yeah. I still have those cards too. On Moto, I still have those cards. um, yeah, I love Pure Steel. That's just pure fun. There is in 12th place an Azorius Control. It says Azorius Control, but fam, it is not Azorius Control. This is 14 creatures, only 4
Whoa.
planeswalkers. Look at this deck. This thing is spicy. We got 3 Restoration Angels. This is all main deck. 4 Snapcaster Mages, 4 Spell Queller, 3 Wall of Omens, and 1 Vendilion Click. And the planeswalkers are Teferi Time Raveler times 3 and 1 Teferi Hero of Dominaria. This deck is spicy meatballs. I know, Francesco, if you're listening or watching, this is right up his alley. He's been preaching the good word of Azorius midrange for 4 or 5 years. um,
Winds of Abandon
Winds of Abandon, I actually played it.
times 2.
I played a singleton Winds of Abandon at the SCG IQ that I played in today and missed top 8 by zero point 0.6 percentage points.
Can we talk about he's playing a generous gift in the sideboard?
Yes. So this is a Generous Gift is a card that in my Modern Horizons uh, episode 1.5, if you want to go back and listen to it, this is a card that I said could make it in blue-white control against Tron, against problematic decks, right? Like Urza, against anything with an ensnaring bridge in it. So
Yeah.
Generous Gift is gas. I'm super excited that it's showing up here and
And there's a cataclysmic Gearhulk.
no, that's like almost a staple in some blue white
It
decks.
still gets me, man.
It gets me too, man. I bought one for like a foil one for like $2. So and they're still very cheap. But yeah, 2 Winds of Abandon, a Factor Fiction, which is still kind of spicy, and then only 23 lands.
Yeah.
And his utility land was Blast Zone, but in my SCG IQ today, I cannot preach the word of Gyre Reach Sanitarium.
I was gonna ask if you tried it.
It's good. It is definitely not bad.
Did it feel good when you didn't have Narset in play?
It's still fine. It just depends, right? Like, it depends how many cards they have in their hand, what your board state looks like. Magic's all contextual, though.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, it still felt fine, especially if you had a land in your hand. You gotta get rid of something. But yeah, shout out to Adam Cohen. He, Team Solitary Pro teammate of mine. He suggested it, and it was good. I actually did get to do the lock too today, where they have one card in their hand, take them in their draw step. After they draw, discard it, and then get them down to 0 cards, and then keep them locked. So that was pretty sick. It was very good. It was very, very good. So yeah, blue-white mid-range is what I'm calling it. It says control. SCG sometimes gets those things
mixed up.
Yeah. And then in 15th place, we did have another blue-white control, and this is more traditional. Thomas Schillingberg, just playing basically Doom Switch's list, which there's nothing wrong with that. Doom Switch is God among men on Moto, so of note, he is playing 2 Stony Silence and
a Rune Halo.
An Ashiok Dream Render and a Rune Halo out of the board. But other than that, this is Doom Switch's list, so very, very good stuff from Blue White this weekend. If we move on to the team tournament, again, just going to kind of talk about this a little bit here. First place's team was Sneak and Show Justin Miller, Mono Red Phoenix, Drew Miles, Bant Scapeshift, James Liu. So congratulate to those guys.
Yep.
Mono Red Phoenix is a deck that Blue White can struggle with. I suggest if you want to improve that matchup, play things like Surgical Extraction, play things like Wall of Omens. Wall of Omens is great at soaking up those little duders that they got.
Yeah, they rely on that a whole lot.
Oh yeah, I mean the birdies can't do all the damage typically unless they have a nut hand, but
right.
And then in second place, now I'm just going to talk about the modern decks. In second place, we had Humans, which is pretty favorable. Obviously, if they go Meddling Mage, Booter, Image, copy my Meddling Mage or my Booter, it can be problematic, but typically we're favored against them. If only slightly, we're still favored. And then in third place, we had Bant Scapeshift. So that...
No, that was their standard player. Third place was Blue-White Control.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Who would have thunk Blue... My bad. So in third place was Azorius control. So let's take a look at this. Um, it's pretty, it's pretty reminiscent of Doom Switch's list as well.
He's playing the Sanitarium.
Yeah, I mean it's good. It's definitely good. It's not just a meme. But other than that, the only difference between him and Doom Switch is we're playing one Jace the Mind Sculptor more, and we're playing that Gaia Reach. 24 lands, and the sideboard is pretty much exactly the same as Doom Switch's, so
Yep.
no spice there. We have Chargetron. Have you seen this deck?
Yeah, it's the Core Tapper,
Core Tapper.
Astral Cornucopia deck.
Do you want to explain to the fine folks what this deck is about? Because I feel like this deck has a very good matchup against Blue White.
So this deck takes a bunch of artifacts that you can cast for 0, like Astral Cornucopia, Chalice of the Void, Ever-Flowing Chalice.
All of them.
And then it puts counters on them with Core Tapper and Surge Node. Your big payoff is like you play Mystic Forge, and you get to just play all of these cards off the top of your deck, and your two like main win conditions are a giant ballista,
Yep.
or you also
Which-
play 4 Karn the Great Creator. So you can lattice lock them. They also play another ballista in the sideboard.
Yeah. Which Ballista is a huge problem for Blue White control. If you don't have the counter spell, you're just dead.
And this version is a Tron variant. I've seen a lot of these that aren't Tron based.
I like the Tron though. Like
Yeah, I mean it
being
makes
able to
sense when
power 'em out.
you're, because like a lot of the other, like I've seen other versions that'll like with Mystic Forge will try and make it a Mystic Forge Storm deck,
Okay.
and they'll play like one Grape Shot.
Oh yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, and they got
It's
like
like-
a bunch of zeros and stuff.
Yeah, so like I've seen that version. I think the Tron Karn plan seems a lot better.
Yeah, no, I like this version much more. I think also this deck was kind of a meme, and now again, this tournament, who knows this player's actual record? Because
Right.
it is a team tournament. But the fact that it is here, we must talk about it. Mystic Forge, though, I do think has given this deck a little bit more legs.
Oh, I mean, this deck would be like I remember Saffron Olive played a version of this like
Yeah.
2 months ago, and he played one Mystic Forge, and like every time he drew it, it was just
wins.
nuts.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like, Mystic Forge, for those that don't know, 4 mana artifact, M20. It's a rare. You may look at the top card of your library. You may cast the top card of your library if it's an artifact card or a colorless non-land card, and you can tap it to pay 1 life to exile the top card of your library. So very reminiscent to Experimental Frenzy. This is one of the cards in the Core 20 preview episode, if you want to go check that out, that I actually did point on maybe showing up in Modern, so that's really cool that it is. I mean, Lattice Lock with Karn is a good time. I that's one of my little known things. I do like locking people out with Lattice. Then we got Hogak.
Because wouldn't be a modern tournament without Hogak.
Until just wait. And I understand. So that's one thing too. I want to kind of touch on. A lot of people are saying, "Oh my gosh, why aren't they emergency banning Hogak?"
Because we're 2 weeks away.
This is ridiculous. Well, that, but also Grand Prix Las Vegas is next weekend.
Yeah.
Okay, and so say you're going to that. If you were going to that, if I was going to that, this helps the players that are very, very well connected if they were to do an emergency ban, because those players would get to test a bunch, and then
Right.
your Johnny Everyday, people that are just taking their deck that they've played since the beginning of Modern, right? They don't have those kind of resources to test that much. So the fact that they're not emergency banning something, I think helps your average player.
I agree with that.
Yeah, so I am okay with the emergency banning in that through that lens
Can we? Can
without
I
having.
just? I
Yeah,
have to point out one thing about this team tournament that makes me real sad.
what's that?
Ben Nikolic played Hogak,
Oh, Ben. Oh, Ben.
right?
So
I
for
mean,
those
like his team got 10th, so like,
for those of you that don't know, Ben Nikolic is a perennial Jeskai control player. He won an Open at the beginning of 2018, I believe.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, that he went to the dark side. That's unlucky. But hey,
yeah.
the deck's
I
insane.
mean,
The deck's
you're
insane.
right. Like, you
So
can't blame people for playing the best deck.
no, yeah, it was it's very good. We've talked about it ad nauseum here, so not gonna really talk about it too much more. Other than that,
Nope.
though, mono, what is it? Grixis Urza was in eighth,
There was an infect in 6th.
and four color Urza by Eli Cassis. I mean, of course, he's playing that deck. That's right up his alley.
Yep.
So yeah, congrats to all those that top aided all of those events, and of course, congrats to all the winners. Yeah. So, there are any takeaways? Big takeaways? I don't. I mean, personally, I don't think the metagame is going to shift too hard until we see a banning.
Right.
But do you have any
I
like other takeaways in terms of where the modern metagame is?
I mean, it seems like you're either big mana decks trying to fight the early aggressive graveyard based decks.
Sure.
You know, like your blue white control, your Urza decks right now. Jund falls into that same category. And I feel like if you're, I don't know, it seems like you either want to be on one of those two spectrums. You either want to be your big mana decks fighting the aggressive decks, or you want to be the aggro decks trying to get under them.
Sure.
Everything else feels out of place right now.
Yeah, and that's the problem really with modern for even before Hogak, there was just no room for these like and as much as I personally don't like them, I know that a lot of people like playing these like Selesnya decks and these Naya decks that are just like
I mean, even decks that are like the devoted
devoted
combo decks,
devoted
or
devastation,
the Sahili twin decks that like,
which was starting to put up results on Moto
right, Hogek.
before Hogak. Yeah, that's a good point too. I'll just be really excited about Modern again when, obviously, I don't have to devote 5 to 8 pieces of graveyard hate.
Right.
Like I remember the days of only having 2 rest in pieces in the board and not having to main any silly surgicals.
Yep.
Yeah.
I remember when people thought it was crazy that we were maining ace or maining surgicals.
Yeah.
People said,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's never. Why would you do that? You don't need that."
Yep. And now it's a staple for blue white to play on main as a 2 of. I today didn't play 2. I didn't play against any Hogaks though, so got lucky there. I hedged my bets on knowing the metagame in the St. Louis area, and I was rewarded. I just got very unlucky. The 2 9-pointers drew themselves into top 8 and it knocked me out. I was the one 10-pointer that didn't
That's
end up
rough.
making it. Yeah, bad beats, but there's an MCQ next weekend which I will be attending, so hope rises again. But yeah, do you have any other things to talk about before we call it a podcast?
No, I think I got all my magic and out for the night.
All right. Well, everyone, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the content, make sure to hit follow or subscribe depending upon where you're consuming the content. Again, it's on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Stitcher, all the podcast apps. I also stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/LesAlex. All those will be in the notes below. But as always, Magic players, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And be kind to one another. Have a good night.
Good night, guys.